Good morning to everyone. Welcome to the webinar that is organized by the Interreg Med funded project to Intermed. The main objective of this project is to develop joint transnational strategies for tourism in Mediterranean island destinations. And today's webinar is the second out of 11 we are organizing from June and beginning of July, and that are dedicated to good management practices for the development of sustainable and responsible tourism. Hopefully, these examples can give an inspiration to destination managers and tourism operators in these difficult times for the sector to reorganize the tourism activities in a way to increase, in a positive way, social, environmental, and economic benefits for residents, tourism workers, and of course, the economic operators. And today's webinar is dedicated to a good practice that was developed and implemented very successfully by the INTENSE project. It's a project funded by the cross-border program, Interreg IT-FR Marittime, and it is about a governance model for sustainable tourism itineraries. As you will see from the following presentations, the project was particularly dedicated to the promotion of hiking and cycling tourism. The speakers that will be with us today are Emiliano Carnieri from the Tuscany region. Tuscany region was the lead partner of the project, and in particular the sector for local public transport, mobility, not tourism sector, and Margherita Mugnai from Sociolab that worked specifically on the development of the governance model for the project. The webinar will be coordinated by me. My name is Lorena Vidas, and I work for the Association of Tuscan Municipalities that was also involved as a partner in this project. And by Jasmine and Massimiliano from Confesercenti Tuscany, that is partner of Intermed. They will facilitate the interaction with the participants, between the speakers and participants. At the end of the presentations from Emiliano and Margherita, we will have a question and answer session. So we ask you to write down eventually your comments and questions for the speakers, and we will read them, gather them and read them after their presentations. You should see at the right side of your GoToMeeting screen the chat box, so you can interact with us within this box. Also, in case you want to intervene at the end, please write in the chat, I want to intervene, and we will give you the floor during the question and answer session. Finally, one practical request. We will ask all the participants to turn down their microphone during the presentations and also the videos, so we can have a better connection for our speakers. This is it from my side. I will give floor now to Mr. Carnieri that will present briefly the objectives and main results of the project. Please, Emiliano.
Yeah, good morning to everybody. Very thanks to invite me to this webinar. I prepare a short presentation dealing with our projects, and just a moment. I don't know why the presentation doesn't start.
Can you go with your arrows con le frecce, sinistra, destra?
Yeah.
It's not working?
No.
If you want, I will open the presentation, okay? just a moment.
I think it's better.
So we have always technical problems with this.
Sorry.
Okay. No, don't worry. Okay, just a moment. Okay. Now you should see my screen. Okay, please.
Yeah, the first one. Well, the Intense project, Sustainable Tourist Routes, is found under an Interreg program, Italy-France Maritime program, and the fund is 5.1 million euros. And well, it is at the end of the work. It started on January 2017 and will end at the end of this year. We got 13 partners coming from Tuscany, Liguria, VAR department, and Maritime Alpes department, and also Corsica and Sardinia Islands. Go on.
This one? Yeah.
The next one, please.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is the aims of the strategic objective of the project. First, development of sustainable tourism, in particular cycling and hiking tourism, as a factor of socio-economic growth. And then enhancement of protect natural areas, cultural and archaeological heritage, integrated management of a route system, and also a greater diversification of tourist presence during the year. And at the end, collaboration between the public administration and small and medium enterprises, promoting the creation of business networks for the provision of a management of the service. Next one, please.
Okay.
Which are the products of the project, Intense project? First, we have to we made an identification of a sustainable tourist itinerary. We made a feasibility study and shared standards of the itinerary, and after this we work to shared governance of itinerary, made governance model and shared standards. And at the end of the project, we will do an agreement between partners for the enhancement, promotion, and realization of the itinerary of the projects. And another action is about projects and investments along the itinerary. Next one, please.
Okay.
Who was involved in the project? We involved public, first of all, public administrations, then professional and voluntary associations, small and medium-sized enterprise, and at the end, tourists. Next one. You can see the map on the left side. Our itinerary consists of a cross-border cycle route and also a series of hiking itineraries that intercept the first in the several points. The itinerary is coastline itinerary, and also we consider the importance of intermodality of transports to arrive to the main islands, Corsica and Sardinia. We during the projects we particularly we did 15 investments, and that are construction of a section of the itinerary, and we purchase the purchase of materials for the use of the routes as cyclettes and other kind of materials. A very important action is to get a shared governance of itinerary. We made numerous meetings with public and private stakeholders to collect ideas and suggestions for the drafting of a governance model of the itinerary. ANCI Toscana and Sociolab will discuss this action in detail. Thanks for your attention, and I will answer to your questions later. Thanks you.
Okay, thank you, Emiliano. We already have some questions in mind for you afterwards. So I would like to give now the floor to Margherita that will present the governance model that is the focus of this webinar. And please, Margherita, if you can also introduce yourself and the Sociolab and present briefly also what is your area of expertise, because you were involved in this project as an external expert that worked for ANCI Tuscany and for intensive project partners in this specific action of the project. So I will give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Lorena, and thank you, Emiliano, for the presentation. As soon as I have the sharing screen option, I will share with you the presentation. As Lorena mentioned, my name is Margherita Mugnai. I'm part of a cooperative and social enterprise called Sociolab, based in Florence, and focusing on participatory practices and collaborative solutions to complex policy choices and projects. As such, we were involved as external experts in the project by ANCI Toscana, was the methodological partner in charge of the governance model and action plan, and we worked in close cooperation with both the lead partner, Regione Toscana, so with Emiliano Carnieri, as he remembers, and with our colleagues in ANCI to develop this shared governance model and action plan. And Emiliano gave you a glimpse of the intense project and its ambitious objectives. Ambitious objectives faced with several challenges, 5 different regions in 2 different countries, a continuous touristic itinerary at different stages of development with different standards, norms, and different authorities in charge of the different stretches, both at the local, regional, and international level. An itinerary with focusing on a niche market sector, that of sustainable tourism, with a wide variety of uses and users. Emiliano mentioned cycling and hiking, but even among the cycling target users, several different type of users can be identified with different needs and interests. Different, as I said, different rules and standards, so that one of the key specific objectives of the process was exactly that of identifying common standards of management and implementation. How to facilitate the design of a shared governance and action plan for this ambitious project. That was the task that we set forward to solve with ANCI Toscana and Regione Toscana. And the answer for us was to make it, the governance model and the action plan, the product and result of a complex and integrated co-design process involving different political, institutional, technical actors and local all stakeholders in the different partner regions. A co-design process with a set of objectives that of ensuring the direct involvement of all partners and local stakeholders to provide the development of a shared governance model and of an integrated action plan with a clear definition of objectives, actions, roles and responsibilities. I will give you some glimpse in the key definitions of this project, which were also, it's important to stress, the product of the process. We didn't enter this process with a set of defined concepts and ideas, but we worked with partners and stakeholders to clarify these black boxes with these complex terms in the most effective way for the project. So when we speak about shared governance model and governance of the itinerary, what we understand is the complex ecosystem of actors and actions and norms that ensure the proper management of the itinerary, not just as an infrastructure, but really and thoroughly as a tourism product, as a service, therefore targeting all areas relevant to the provision of the best possible service for a wide variety of users. A shared collaborative governance requires to widen the ecosystem and to move away from a top-down vertical approach and to include different types of actors, both public and private, that have different interests and that can contribute with their resources to making this service the best possible and the most accessible for users. So it's important to note that this is not just a matter of making the public sector capable of delivering and managing the infrastructure, but of actually involving all private and different interests surrounding the itinerary. When we looked at governance, we saw that together with Regione Toscana and ANCI Toscana, that the governance didn't refer only to the very important aspect of planning and implementation of the infrastructure, but it also required a strong focus on the management of all the promotion activities and correlated services that make the infrastructure accessible, as well as all the activities that ensure correct and proper maintenance of the itinerary, and of course, extremely important, the safety of users on the itinerary. So these three dimensions of governance were the key guiding dimensions that on which we focused during the entire process. Direct involvement of partners and local stakeholders was and is essential to make sure that an international ambitious governance model is embedded and accepted at the regional and local level. This is why we made participation of stakeholders and of the public a key element of the definition of the model and action plan, a key component, in order for us to harvest all the local knowledge that is available to stakeholders on the ground, activate key resources and connect them to design, co-design and co-create pilot projects in order to deliver those services that are not necessarily already accessible for users on the itinerary. What do we mean by co-design? You might have heard about this term before. It's a wide range approach that is applied in different fields such as urban planning, public services, community building, and it basically enables all stakeholders, from experts to users, to participate in the creation or innovation of services. You can understand that since we were working on the development of an innovative service, the intense itinerary, a wide range of users and stakeholders was to be activated and involved to assess the current situation, imagine the future potential of the itinerary, and generate ideas on how to innovate and make the service accessible so as to create an integrated tourism product. Another key term for this process is what we call user-centered service design. This is, of course, connected with co-design in terms of putting stakeholders and users at the center, but it has a particular focus on looking at the service from the point of view of users. As I said, an itinerary that encompasses both cycling routes, hiking routes, but also maritime itineraries, sea experiences and the likes, requires an understanding of who these users are and what is their experience. So even when not direct users, but stakeholders representing users were involved in the work, we focused our activity on user experience. So how do users perceive the itinerary and what can we do to better their experience? A number of user-centered standards exist for sustainable tourism itineraries. For the sake of the Intense project, we focused on the Eurovelo standards for sustainable continuous cycling itinerary. And as you can see from this slide, providing a effective service and tourism product in this field doesn't only mean providing an adequate infrastructure, which is of course extremely important, and it's at the first place, let's say, first spot in the list of standards. But it also means, as Emiliano mentioned, ensuring intermodal mobility and full accessibility to the infrastructure through different means of transport. It means providing specific services for bikers along the itinerary and for other specific users, such as bicycle repairs or rental, for example. It means, of course, a wide variety and accessibility of accommodation, food and wine services that are not just catering to all tourists in particular, but have a particular focus on this kind of sustainable tourism niche market. So for instance, restaurants and hotels that allow you to bring your bicycle inside for safety. of course, we have then the issue of visibility and accessibility of information on the itinerary. So everything that regards product promotion and the availability of tour operators willing to sell you, for instance, a package tour for a part of the itinerary. And last but not least, the presence along the itinerary of places of interest and local attractions that make the experience of the user as rich and full and varied as possible. When we talk about action plan, this is really the how to make the governance model alive and functioning. And it's the strategic framework for all the actions that will take place during the project, but especially after project completion, with a clear identification of the objectives, so the why we want to do what we're doing, what we want to achieve, the actions as specific as possible on what is needed to be done in order to achieve those objectives, the key actors and their roles and level of involvement in the action. The process in itself. I'm going to go more pragmatically into what we did on the ground. These are the steps of the co-design process that we developed. It was a process based on a pilot approach. So we developed a shared methodology and we developed a pilot process in Tuscany that was the model and the base for partners to implement their own co-design process in their own local context. I'm going to go here into more detail on, of course, the Tuscan pilot to allow you to get a better sense of what we actually did on the ground. Starting from the shared methodology, that of course is needed to have a shared understanding of what we're doing. We developed a toolkit for all partners with indication not only of objectives and definition and process phases and steps, but also, and this is very important, very concrete how-to sections with tools and templates to ensure that the partners had all the practical support in implementing the project on the ground. The preliminary activity in the process, in the pilot process in Tuscany, was of course that of conducting a thorough stakeholder mapping. This is essential in all co-design activities because it allows you to make sure that all the relevant people that should be in the process are involved actively and are aware of the project. How did we do it concretely? We identified a first cohort of key informants, and of course Emiliano, with his extensive knowledge of the local context and actors, was one of them, but not the only one. And we conducted in-depth qualitative interviews with them using a snowball sampling approach to involve a wider group of stakeholders, which allowed us to create a database of more than 100 names, actual names, and roles and locations and level of involvement in the project of actors divided into 4 key categories. Public actors, both regional and local, and private actors, both civil society and the SME and private sector persons. One important element of the stakeholder mapping that we chose to implement, also by starting the preliminary analysis with the key informants, was to focus on the mapping on stakeholders that had either an expert knowledge in the infrastructure and on the infrastructure, on the management and development of the itinerary as such, but also on the management and provision of key services. And you understand here that the private sector is very important in this area. And last but not least, a category of actors that we called pioneer users. So users that were part of this niche market and were capable of defining the minimum requirements and standards for the itinerary, for the service, for the tourist product, and were also in the right place to have a multiplier effect on their own communities. Once the mapping was completed, or at least had reached a satisfactory level of richness and diversity, because stakeholder mapping is never completely completed, we launched a call for participants. Through an invitation that was communicated widely by partners and by the stakeholders involved in the preliminary mapping, and that contained a clear reference to why we were inviting participants to take part in these collaborative working groups, who was inviting them, the callers of the project, who were they going to find together with them in the working group, how the work was going to be conducted concretely as possible, with time, dates, and time requirements for participation, and very important, what are the opportunities for those that were taking part in the project. And this is extremely relevant because it gives a clear understanding on the connection of the project with their motivation and personal interests. We launched the invitation, and we used a very simple Google form to collect answers. That was extremely successful and allowed us to obtain more than 200 responses. This is an example of, let's say, a selection, schematic selection of the stakeholders involved in the project, so that you can see the variety of stakeholders that we targeted and directly invited to take part. And to take part to what, though? As I said, to take part to a series of 6 workshops organized in 3 areas in Tuscany, so as to cover the almost totality of the itinerary and of the infrastructure. So three macro areas were identified, and 2 sets of workshops for each area was designed and organized. The partners, of course, launched their own activities and adapted the process to their local context. The first set of workshop, as I said, in 3 different areas along the line of the itinerary, was a workshop focusing on today. It was a workshop with a strong user-centered approach. Participants were involved also through the use of visual aids and graphic facilitation, as you can see in the image, to conduct a collective assessment of the actual standards of the current itinerary and infrastructure in terms of available service, connectivity, promotion, activities and projects, in order to identify strengths, weaknesses, and strategic directions, the way forward. This is an example of workshop results. It just focused on one area, of course, and one dimension of.
Sorry, Margherita, I think we lost your...
Of the service and of the governance, in this case, the intermodal attempt. The results of this kind of exercise are extremely qualitative, but also very specific, because you involved stakeholders that have a strong local knowledge and allow you to understand the user experience. Sorry?
We lost you. Hello, we lost you. Can you please turn down your camera? Maybe it will be
yes.
better. Okay.
Yes, I turned down my camera.
Now
should I continue?
Better. Yes, please.
Okay, good, good. So qualitative and very specific notation based on expert knowledge and user experience in that particular area. Of course, we had a wide number of these kind of results from all the workshops we held in the different local areas, and we compiled full reports containing these kind of indication. A very important element for this kind of workshop, of the first workshop, is to make available all relevant information. The project had already delivered and developed, as Emiliano mentioned, feasibility studies, maps of the itinerary, and norms concerning the best possible management of the itinerary, and they were all made available to participants to browse through. And this is very important in this kind of work. The second workshop, the one that followed the first, was in the same locations, with the same actors, but also new actors that were interested and involved in the project in the meantime, and focused this time not on the present but on the future. It was very important to give participants, but also partners, the feel that this is a long-term process that goes way beyond the life of the project, and that has to be the object of a collaborative approach from of different actors and sectors. These workshops therefore projected participants in 2023 and were designed to share the strategic directions identified in the first workshop, but also enrich them through an open space session with the participants present, and subsequently create specific sub-working groups during the workshop dedicated to ideating and developing concrete pilot projects that were thought by the participants in order to meet the strategic directions. This is another template of what the participants actually worked on during the project. As you can see, they were asked to identify the strategic direction that they chose among those identified in the first workshop or in the course of the open space session at the beginning. The outcome expected for this strategic direction, the action project as concretely as possible that they envisaged possible, and in which they envisaged a concrete involvement on their side, as well as the other key actors, their roles and the resources available or needed. Very important in this kind of workshop is to allow participants to self-organize in groups according to their interests. and involvement in the strategic direction or project. This is really a highly co-creative exercise in which local networks are strengthened and opportunities for future collaboration are created, and as such maximum freedom of movement of participants among groups is required. Of course, it was necessary and essential to have this kind of co-design approach also with partners. So a workshop with partners was specifically designed and delivered to identify the shared principles of the governance model and elements of the action plan. Partners were encouraged through a participatory and engaging work cafe-based activity to focus on the success factors for an effective international cooperation and to identify the joint actions that they believed essential to support the development of the itinerary. For them as well, the focus was not on the end of the project, but was on beyond the end of the project cycle to ensure sustainability. This is the timeline of the project. I will not detail it in much detail, just to show you that there is a sequence in which the actions can take place, and an indicative duration of 7 months for the completion in the pilot areas. Of course, a little bit more time for the partners to implement their action on the ground. As for the results, I'll try to go quickly through them. This kind of approach created a richness of inputs, recommendations, both in terms of policy and political choices, but also in terms of actual projects to be implemented on the ground. What is very important is that this process allowed us to confirm and enrich the initial assessment with the knowledge of key stakeholders and partners. It allows us so to identify the opportunities of this kind of project and itinerary, opportunities such as the growing market for this kind of sustainable slow mobility tourism, and opportunities also in terms of the high touristic attraction of this of the areas touched by the itinerary, but also the high fragmentation of the market, as I mentioned before, and the wide variety of users and uses. The fragmentation in infrastructural quality of the itinerary and the discontinuity of the itinerary, and the lack of culture for this among road users for this kind of mobility. So low levels of safety still for users that are not just connected to the quality of the infrastructure, but really on the diffuse culture in the countries involved. The challenge of involving the private sector and innovating the private tourism sector to cater to this segment of tourism, and of course the challenge of moving away from exclusive car use to access specific spots on the itinerary, as mentioned also by Emiliano. The shared principles of the governance model are also the product of these extensive exchanges and conversations had with stakeholders and partners. And as you can see here, they are a set of general principles that go from the very important joint effort between the technical experts and the technical sectors of institutions and the political representatives. It is very important to underline that developing an itinerary of this kind is not just the product of technical choices, but is also the product of policy choices, and political actors and decision makers should be part of the conversation, as well as different sectors, as this is a multidimensional governance model and itinerary that touches upon different areas, not just infrastructure, but also tourism and communication, and has to require the involvement of different sectors of the regional agencies and governments, of course, transnational cooperation with among partners to identify key common standards and the continuity of the itinerary, multi-stakeholder participation that, as you've seen, is really at the heart of the sustainability of this kind of approach. And last but not least, the need to bridge the gap between expert and user knowledge, and making a user-centered perspective part of the way in which we create and innovate the service. This is a visual representation of the model. I will not go into detail in describing it. Just want to highlight that it has circular concentric structure, because the principles are at the center and are the intentions, the common shared intentions that hold the entire system together, and that these principles are held and protected by the key person and offices in the regional government involved. So Emiliano is definitely one element of this governance, a very important element of this governance model. But also that each time the circle gets larger, there is an increase and diversification of the actors involved, which ensures a strengthening of the problem-solving capacity, the multiplication of potential stakeholders, of projects, and of activities to be implemented. Again, the action plan was the result of the co-design process, and it identified very specific objectives, actions, actors, and roles. They were derived from the reports and from the work done in the different workshops, both in Tuscany and internationally. This is just an example I wanted to share with you of a set of objective action, actors, and roles to show you that it's really a very concrete and specific guide, the action plan, on what should we do to make this project sustainable and to allow it to have a life that goes beyond the project cycle. And with this, I will open the floor for question. There is a link for a short video, but I will allow you to watch it in your own time, so to have a feel of the action on the ground. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Margherita. Thank you for this really thorough and clear presentation about the model. I think we can open now the question and answer session, because we received several questions, a lot of interest. And I will start with the first one that is I think for Emiliano Carnieri, because it's about the organization within the regional government. So the question is, what were the sectors of the regional government involved in the project, and how important it is to develop integrated policies and strategies for tourism between different departments like tourism, mobility, environmental, and so on?
Okay, this is an important question because the integration of regional mobility, tourism, and environment policy is essential to develop the sustainable economic model. For this reason, the sector involved in this project are infrastructure and mobility department and tourism department. Well, it is also very important the collaboration between the regional and local level, especially the collaboration between public administration. In this way, Tuscany region made a lot of agreement with municipalities for planning and the implementation of the infrastructure, and also for the promotion and the development of service. And well, few words also for other argument. For example, I think that it's necessary to introduce also innovative solution to stimulate the growth of startup enterprise, especially in the new technology sector. For example, in the development of application for usability of itineraries and service connected to them. And another reflection is about the health emergency due to the COVID-19. I think that we need to implement the outdoor tourism, and this represents the challenge that we must face in the coming months in order to relaunch the entire tourism sector. And well, the Intense project also work in this way. We try to find new strategies for the development of outdoor and sustainable tourism. And it is, I think also that it is very important to collaborate between the collaboration between different projects, such as Intense, your project, and other projects.
Okay. Thank you, Emiliano. I think so. The main points we have to take away from this project and after this webinar, from your point of view, is we have to always implement the multi-stakeholder approach. So create an ecosystem that includes all the stakeholders and also within the regional and local government departments. And then the other one is to focus on new strategies for outdoor sustainable tourism that is really needed in this moment. So thank you. The next two questions are quite the same, from Jasmine and Christina, and it's for Margherita, because it's about maybe the most difficult part of all the participatory and governance development process. And the questions are the following. So the first one is, what was the level of involvement of tourists and local communities in the participatory process and development of itineraries, and did you encounter difficulties in approaching and working with those two types of stakeholders. And from Christina, what was the cooperation with the stakeholders like? Were they willing to get involved, or did you have to animate them? And if so, how did you motivate them to get involved? A lot of questions.
Yes, okay. I will go step by step on the level of involvement. I would say that the level of involvement was very high with regards also with other co-design or other multi-stakeholder processes. But it's important to say that it was not unconditional, in the sense that, as I mentioned before, we really worked thoroughly on stakeholder mapping to ensure that the right persons were in the working groups. Since, as I said, we are focusing, as you are, on a niche market sector in very competitive regions with very different market sectors for tourism. We made the conscious choice to focus on those that we called pioneer users. So we moved away from the traditional open door approach to participation to actually go towards spending a lot of time and energy in finding the right contacts and convincing them to take part in the process, which in practical terms means a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and a lot of time to understand who were these pioneers, users and stakeholders, and to promote the call to them. And this directly connects with what Christina asked about the cooperation with stakeholders and whether they were willing to get involved. I would say that it really helps really helped in our case, and I believe in yours as well, that sustainable tourism, it is a niche, but it's a very appealing topic. It's growing, and it creates a lot of interest in specific stakeholders that are trying to promote this kind of approach. So when promoting the call for participants, we had a lot of interest in the project, and this definitely helped us in ensuring participation. What also helps, as I said, is to provide a clear indication of what's in there for them. So bluntly speaking, touch upon their personal motivation to get involved. Why should they spend time and energy to be part of this working group, and what they can take out of? And as I said, time on face-to-face contacts, either by phone or in person, to make sure that people understand the potential of their participation and take part in it. But I would say that it's encouraging that this kind of topic creates a lot of interest, and as Emiliano said, especially in these difficult times, there is a need to find alternative, innovative strategies and solutions. So if you design your process to address those needs, I would say you have strong indications that you will have a success in terms of participation.
Okay, thank you.
Can I
Yes.
say a few words?
Sure.
Well, I would like to say that indeed the Intense project started in 2017, but the activities and the collaboration with between regional administration, with local administration and some stakeholders started in 2015. So at the beginning of the intense project, we got a good conditions to do a good job. And I think that it's a very important point, because we think that we have to plan and implementation of the infrastructure is a parallel process with the promotion and development of service, and this is a process from the beginning of planning of the infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I mean the Tyrrhenian cycle route. That is an international cycle route which is interest Liguria and Lazio regions.
Okay, thank you, Emiliano. So long-term planning and engagement, continuous engagement with stakeholders. The next question is also tied to this, and Margherita probably already gave us a part of the answer, but I will read it anyway. It's from Jasmine. Can you give us some advice on how to better engage with different types of stakeholders, and what worked well? I think we already heard about this, but also what not. It's important to know if you failed in some approaches or it was more difficult, and what would you do differently this time if you would to start again this process.
Yes, thank you, Lorena. This is always a difficult but necessary question. And what I would do differently, what we would do differently probably would be to ensure to have a little bit more time to follow up with the local working groups on specific pilot projects. This is a general regret that you have when implementing a co-design process and having, as you always do, a limited amount of time and resources. But it's true that the second round of collaborative local workshops allowed a richness of projects and ideas to see the light and to be connected to stakeholders that were actually capable of developing them, are capable of developing them concretely. This is invaluable material that was instrumental for us and for the partners in defining the action plan. So these projects are part of the action plan. But I would say that having some specific follow-up time with the most promising pilots to ensure that they see the light in the space of the project is important. It's something that is going to be partly addressed in the extension of the project and in the development of some pilot projects on the ground. And it's definitely something I would encourage you to do in your own project. Follow up and mentor promising ideas emerging from the conversation, the dialogue, and the co-design to develop small but actionable concrete prototypes and make results visible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this advice. Very clear. We go to the last question from Emiliano, and you can both, I think, answer this one. It's the question we always ask for the projects, because they have a limited time that where we can act and implement the activities. So the question is, how do you assure the sustainability of project actions after project's end? And what resources are needed for the management of these itineraries? And did you have to provide specific training for public officials, SMEs, tourist operators, and other types of stakeholders?
Okay, this is a good question, and I try to answer. The tyrannical cycle route that it is a part of intense itinerary will be financed with national and regional funds. Indeed, the Tuscany region has already financed the construction of a third of the infrastructure, and we will hope that at the end of the other period, the next period of the programmation, we finished the infrastructure. And well, also at the end of the project, we have an agreement, a technical agreement between partners to make a technical table, a technical group for planning and the implementation of the itinerary and for the promotion, and especially to find the Europe fund in the next period. And I think that this will permit to work for several years.
Okay, thank you, Emiliano. It was clear, and this is about the infrastructure investment. But what about how to proceed with implementing the participative governance approach with the stakeholders? I don't know, Margherita, if you want to add something?
Yes, absolutely. As I said, in terms of sustainability through training, we of course developed toolkits, materials, and bilateral guidelines for all partners to develop the process on the ground in their local context, the co-design process. So not, as Emiliano mentioned, the infrastructure, but really the multi-stakeholder engagement process. Probably the best specific type of training is to actively take part in the process itself. So launching the call for participants for partners, adhering to the call for participants for stakeholders, taking part in the workshops, seeing the co-design in action. All this allows a wide variety of stakeholders to experience the potential of the approach and to do things differently. And it's probably the most effective training, the learning by doing approach that I would encourage you to look at in your own actions and projects. And as Emiliano mentioned, for sustainability, the key aspect is that of ensuring continuity of this governance model. So making sure that partners and relevant public actors sign the joint agreement that Emiliano mentioned, and continue to work on this collaborative circular governance. Also by ensuring access to funding, as Emiliano rightly pointed out, but also by creating spaces for small specific pilot actions on the ground. As I said before, the best way to ensure sustainability for me, for us, is to make to show that these things are possible and doable, and to do it by supporting small pilot projects on the ground, and allow regional institutions and governments to play the role of facilitators of collaborative solutions in constant dialogue with a wide variety of stakeholders and actors.
Thank you. And of course, like Emiliano mentioned before, we have to collaborate between the projects, because we are a big community of the projects. One big community of sustainable tourism projects is the one of the Interreg MED program, and Thomas from Nextur, that is associated partner of Intermed, but is also a partner of the horizontal project on sustainable tourism of the Interreg MED program. Hi, Thomas. He wrote that he would like to point out their role in helping to carry out the project's outputs also after its end. So, Thomas, do you want to say something?
Just quickly, because I haven't prepared anything, but as you know, the horizontal project are a pretty new concept of the Interreg MED program, and WinterMed is one of the 22 modular projects that are under the sustainable tourism umbrella. And we are currently working on the capitalization and transferring strategy, so it's not really yet. You have been asked to answer the transferring questionnaire for some of you. I just want to point out that, of course, one of the objectives of the Interreg MED horizontal project on sustainable tourism is to carry out the outputs of closed project, because on the 22 modular projects who are under the horizontal project program, almost half of them are already closed and finished. But we are, of course, going to release a whole catalog of outputs from ongoing and closed projects for policymakers to take, and we are going to try to organize a bilateral meeting, even if the project is closed, and of course also within the community, because different project can be interested with the other one outputs. I don't know if I'm being clear, but everything is going to be explained within the next month.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, we rely very much on you because, of course, we have you have a very big communities of private and public stakeholders, partners from all other projects that deal with sustainable tourism. And we have to gather knowledge from all these institutions that are working all around Mediterranean on sustainable tourism development. And I think that we finalized the questions and comments. So if there are the questions are finished.
Can I say, Lorena?
Yes.
Can I say?
Sure. Sorry, Emiliano. Sure.
No. A little point. I think that another important element is that stakeholders, public and private stakeholders, want the tyrannical cycle route and a shared model, and because that they think that it is a real opportunity for the economic development of the territories, and that's the principal reason why I think that the project will go on in the next years.
So there is an economic interest of the territories that is very important, and this is the motivation. How you can motivate your stakeholders, of course. Thank you. So does anybody else want to comment or say something? Okay, I think we can close today's webinar. At this point, I would like to thank very much the speakers and congratulate on very good interventions. And I would also like to invite all the participants from today to join us for the next webinars, the next 10 we are organizing. In particular, this week we have 2 more. The first one tomorrow, it's about Tourism Sustainability Toolkit, adapting tourism sustainability evaluation methods to local needs. And on Friday, 19th, the transferability plan. Both of these webinars are dedicated to the good practices from Interreg Co-Evolve project. This project addresses the sustainable tourism planning, taking into consideration, in particular, the integrated coastal zone management and maritime spatial planning principles. But of course, you will join us tomorrow and on Friday, and you can find more information about these 2 webinars in particular on the website of the project. I will share in the chat box the website, so you can find all the information there and register for these 2 events. And I would like to ask you one last thing. If you can turn on all your cameras so we can make a nice picture of people and we can at least see you for a minute. Okay, not everybody has a camera, maybe. Okay, thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Margherita.
everyone.